You know, you got to manage tourism. This is what the head of the tourism division at the American Planning Association says: the impacts of tourism on the community can be beneficial if planned and managed, or extremely damaging if left without controls. We just had a big conference in D.C. about 2 weeks ago called Over Tourism. How tourism is ruining 30 of the greatest places on the planet Earth. You know, it doesn't have to. So we're going to talk about, for a few minutes, some ideas on how you can keep from harming that goose that lays the golden egg. First, it's, you know, understanding the difference between mass market tourism and sustainable tourism. So what is that difference? Well, mass market tourism is all about heads and beds. It's about quantity. You know, it's also about things that are artificial, homogenized, generic, and formulaic. On the other hand, sustainable tourism is about quality. Quality. Things in places that are authentic, specialized, unique, and homegrown. So this is, you know, these are all examples of, you know, mass market tourism, mega hotels, theme parks. You know, we're carrying as many as 6,000 people now on some of the cruise ships. So imagine if you're in a little town like in St. Thomas, you have 5 of these ships pulling at the same time. They have, you know, 3 times as many people as live on the entire island. And by the way, all their money is being spent on the cruise ship line. They're not spending very little in that community. So the community gets all the downside and none of the upside. And by the way, did you know that if you spend $1 in a local store, it will recirculate through your community 3 times more than if you spend $1 in a chain store? Because the locally owned store has a, you know, local attorney and a local accountant and a local, you know, PR firm or whatever. You know, so sustainable tourism, distinctive destinations, historic buildings, unspoiled scenery, locally owned buildings. You know, mass market tourism is about high volume, high impact, and low yield. Sustainable tourism is about low volume, low impact, high yield. And, you know, understanding this, you got to recognize that all tourists are not created equal. So, you know, when I was in college, the spring break capital of America was Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And they wanted to be the spring break capital of America. They thought it was a great idea to, you know, invite a couple of million college kids to come down there each spring. But of course, what they weren't counting on is they were going to sleep 6 to 8 to a room. The only thing they spent money on was beer. They had to hire all kinds of extra police and cleanup crews. And then nobody else would come because they got an image as an out-of-control, drunken college kid kind of town. Well, guess what? They don't have as many tourists anymore. They're no longer the spring break capital of America. Now it's Panama City, at least until the hurricane, and Cancun. But, you know, the tourists that come now sleep 2 to a room. They eat in fancy restaurants and buy things in nice stores, and they don't have to hire extra police or extra cleanup crews, etc., etc. They made a conscious decision to embrace sustainable tourism, not mass market tourism. Let's talk about, you know, tourism is the sum total of the travel experience. It's not just what happens, you know, at a house tour here in Charleston. It's about everything you see and do from the time you leave home to get where you're going and go back again. It's about the hotels you sleep in and the restaurants that you eat in. And, you know, we sort of think that hotels ought to fit in architecturally and environmentally. You know, here's an ad I pulled out of an airline magazine. I think it said the chain of hotels should reflect a city and not each other, although they used to always reflect each other. And, you know, it's interesting. Marriott did this study and found that it turns out millennials said that authenticity and interesting were more important than comfortable and predictable in the lodging world. You know, you've heard that old slogan about Holiday Inn. The best thing about Holiday Inn was no surprises. You know what the worst thing about Holiday Inn is? No surprises. So this is, you know, why we've had growth in like heritage tourism and things like Airbnb, which I'm going to come back and talk to about in a minute, etc. And also, you know, it turns out young people in particular say they like to stay downtown. Now, we used to always have downtown hotels in every small town in South Carolina, but then we just stopped and put them all on the highway. So I was in Richmond, Indiana, speaking to Preservation, Indiana about a year ago, and they put me up in this Hampton Inn out on the highway because they didn't have a downtown hotel. The only thing I could walk to was the Jiffy Lube. So, you know, I'm saying to them, well, maybe you guys might want to have a downtown hotel, which actually we're doing that again. So here's a new downtown hotel in Lexington called the Call Alto Inn. You know, since they saved an old manor house, that's where you check in and where you have your breakfast. So we're starting to do that all over the country. And finally, we're actually restoring historic buildings for hotels everywhere. So this is the Pabst Brewery, which is now brew house inn and suites. Or did you know that H.H. Richardson's largest building, the State Mental Hospital in New York, is now the Henry Hotel? Or the jail in San Antonio is now a Holiday Inn? Or the John Deere factory in Waterloo is now a Marriott? Or, I love this company, Minimums. They have 26 hotels all in the Northwest. And all of them are in restored historic buildings like this elementary school in Portland. Short-term rentals, I know you talked about this, and congratulations on having one of the best things. You know what? Ben Franklin used to say everything in moderation. And you know, when Airbnb was first invented, it was, you know, this idea of you got an extra bedroom in your house and you could, you know, rent that out to somebody. Great idea. You know, and there are people like me, empty nesters. I got lots of empty bedrooms in my house. Because my kids have all gone now, etc. And so, you know, that made a lot of sense. But then people started doing things like building 20-story buildings in New York, saying they were an apartment building, and then leasing out every single unit as a short-term rental. Basically, you know, building a hotel without any zoning approval. Or like coming into a city like Savannah or Charleston and buying up 5 houses on a block. And so we're seeing this all over the country where taking so many units off of the market, particularly by big developers, is reducing our supply of affordable housing. It's driving up the prices for everyone. And so this is a hot issue all over the country, and communities are starting to think about, well, at least we ought to license these things, and you know, we ought to, you know, get the tax revenue off them, and you know, we might actually want to limit them. So some cities now are limiting the Airbnbs to the, you know, owner-occupied buildings or owner-occupied +1. You know, they're not allowing people to build, you know, apartment buildings and turn the whole thing into a hotel in New York anymore. This is not just an issue here in the U.S., it's an issue all over the world. Another thing you might want to think about is how to get tourists out of their cars. So congestion, that's a big issue everywhere. Yeah, you know, but obviously, you know, you could actually accommodate more tourists, you just can't accommodate more of their cars. Right? And by the way, walking is the most popular form of recreation in America by far. And what's the fastest growing form of transportation? Bicycling is the fastest growing form of transportation. And I can tell you that there is nobody in the urban planning world who hasn't figured out that if we design cities around cars, you're going to get more cars. But if you design cities around people, you're going to get more people in better places. So one of the things you need to think about is how to get people out of their cars. And we are undergoing a transportation revolution in America. Did you know that young people are buying a lot less cars and they're driving less? And, you know, look at this. 1985, 90% of 19-year-olds had a driver's license. By 2016, it was 67%. Did you know a quarter of all young people don't even know how to drive? You know, and then we have things like like Uber and Lyft and car share and bike share. Autonomous vehicles are coming, you know, and they're all going to impact our, you know, transportation world. I think, you know, George Will kind of sums it up pretty well. He says, like the smartphone, which you lived without until about a decade ago, now we can't imagine living without. Future mobility innovations will quickly change from unanticipated to indispensable. You know, Google does a millennial survey every year, and you know, last year they asked young people, what's the one thing you couldn't live without? Almost 70% said their cell phone. Only 20-something% said a car. That just gives you some idea of how the world has changed. I'm a big advocate for bicycling infrastructure. For one reason, it gives you more bang for your buck. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's a way to get more bang for your buck. So I have a brother-in-law that lives on the Outer Banks that built a bike trail that parallels the beach road, right? And it turns out people extend their vacations one full day because now, you know, they can get around on a bicycle. Or if you go to Hilton Head, where, you know, Charles Fraser is known for developing Hilton Head, he always said more people came to ride bikes than to play golf. Certainly true today. And this is, you know, we looked at this around the country. Do you know the bike infrastructure costs about 1/20th of what auto infrastructure does for the exact same amount of distance? So, you know, here's a mile of protected bikeway. It's expensive, $400,000 in downtown San Francisco, but a mile of new street, in city street, $570 million. A new mile of East Bay Bridge, $2 billion. You know, we all, you know, we want the best of everything in America. We're just not willing to pay for anything. You know, and our gas tax revenue is going down because cars are more fuel efficient. So you want more bang for your transportation buck, start investing in, you know, human-powered infrastructure. Now I want to say a word about parking. You know, parking is real expensive. Surface parking, $3,000 to $4,000 a space. Structured parking, $15,000 to $20,000 a space. Underground parking, $50,000 a space. So suppose instead of building 2 structured parking spaces, you said that as a developer, well, I'll have a car share facility here, and I'll have a bike share facility, and maybe you might want to be on like a bus route, for example, and there's a lot of young people who actually love that idea, but they don't want to pay for that parking space that they're not using anymore. By the way, you can park 12 bicycles in the space of 1 car. So I'm not saying, but you're all worried about congestion and try to figure out ways to get people out of their cars. And it's probably pretty easy to do in a place like this. How about educating visitors? Tell them what your expectations are. In fact, if the more people know about a place, the more they'll take care of a place. We learned this in the conservation world, that when people know why a place is worth preserving, they value it more. And by the way, we educate in order to reduce the need to regulate. And you might talk about some of the expectations of tourists. So with D.C., I don't know if you know this, if you come to D.C. and you get on the metro, the tourists always were standing on the left when people were trying to get to work, and the commuters are like yelling at them. So now they even pass out little flyers that say, stand to the right on the escalators. Just showing people what the norms of the community are. Tell your story. So I grew up in Birmingham, right? The story of a place is incredibly valuable to a place. And our story is painful and disturbing. But we got one of the great civil rights museums in the world in Birmingham. And you go there, you'll hear people speaking German and French and Dutch coming from all the world to hear our story. And by the way, we didn't tear down all the steel mills. We saved one of them, the Sloss Furnace, which is now a state park. Tell people about our industrial background. So we might want to celebrate some of the famous people, and you do this, but think about more contemporary people, or celebrate some of the famous events like the Great Depression or the lunch counter sit-ins in Greensboro. You might say, well, we don't have any famous people in my town. Well, maybe celebrate ordinary people. Like watermen or ranchers or coal miners or commuters. Tell your story. This is the Chisholm Trail mural in downtown Fort Worth. Tells us story about the role the cattle drives played in the founding of Fort Worth. Or this is my little town, Tacoma Park, Maryland. That's our family album. Every one of those pictures is important to the history of our town. Or this is in Nashua, New Hampshire. They used to have a real diner called the Yankee Flyer Diner, and it burned down, and they wanted to bring it back to life, and they did it in that mural. And guess how they paid for it? All the people in the mural are real people who live in Nashua today. They all paid to have their pictures put into the mural. Where there's a will, there's a way. How about the Louisville Slugger Baseball Museum in downtown Louisville? It's appropriate to have the biggest bat because that's where they make the bats we're using in the major leagues. Or remember those old postcards? Want to see what old Florida looks like? Well, you can see it in downtown Orlando in this big postcard. And we always used to integrate art and infrastructure, and then we kind of forgot about that. We're actually starting to do it again. There's the new Frog Bridge across the Connecticut River in Hanover, New Hampshire, just opened a couple of years ago. This is in Spokane, Washington, where they manufacture radio flyer wagons. So it's a piece of playground equipment, a piece of public art, and something that tells you about the history of the community. Or how about, did you know that all the street lights in Hershey, Pennsylvania are Hershey? And I know every town in South Carolina's got some blank wall like that. You say, well, what can you do with that? Well, you can do something like this. This is in downtown Columbia, South Carolina. They finally had to put a sign up there because people were trying to drive in. A Trump Floyd full-eyed mural. So tourism must be managed. How many tourists are too many tourists? How many tour buses are too many tour buses? How many hotels are too many hotels? If you don't ask those questions, you can run the risk of destroying the very thing that people come to see. And you'll create a sense of backlash and resentment about tourism in a place.